Welcome to CV Ministries Church Security Through Prevention podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Blevins. My guest this week is Dr. Dave Stevens. Dave has been on the podcast before, and he is the president and founder of CorrValues and CV Ministries. Certifying church security operators is something that has been in the works for a while, and we are now ready to roll it out. With Dave's experience in this area, I've asked him to unpack it today for everyone. We are excited to be on the forefront of helping church security to become a cohesive ministry throughout the country. I still want to encourage you to do a Google review. As mentioned before, we have added MeWe to our social media platforms, and we invite you, if you move that direction, to go to the CV Ministries page and like us. We haven't removed our Facebook CV Ministries page and really don't intend to anytime soon, but we've just added another location. As always, please like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. All right, so let's go ahead and find out more about certifying church security operators and what that looks like with Dr. Dave Stevens. Dave, welcome back to the Church Security Through Prevention podcast.
Thank you. Good to be back.
Yeah, so something that we want to talk about today that we want to something that we've talked about for a long time and been putting together for a long time is a certification piece that we want to that I need you to unpack because you know more about it than I do. But it's going to be a certification of church security individuals.
Yes,
that as they go through our training and various aspects of qualifications, then we'll certify them as church security operators. Is that correct?
Yes. Yep. Exactly.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about what does that look like? What does that process look like? How, what's the starting point in that?
So let me give a little bit of context and background. The field, if we can even call it that, probably the better way to say it is the practice of church safety and security is still a relatively new thing. One of the earliest books written on it was in 2005, and then it probably in the last 5 years or so, I think in large measure through the efforts of Jimmy Meeks and Carl Chin and Colonel Dave Grossman and the Sheepdog seminars, I think more and more people around the country have become aware of the need to protect the flock, which is what is meant in the name sheepdog. But doing that requires people that know what they're doing. And like all new practices or new skills, or we could even say clinicians, clinician is a broad term that is used for teachers, for band directors, for choir directors, for mental health professionals, for people in a lot of different fields. But it basically means somebody who has a certain skill and uses that skill. And it's our opinion that that needs to happen for people who are actively involved in church safety and security. There needs to be formalized training. There needs to be confidence on the part of a pastor or a church staff or an elder board or a deacon board that people who are doing church safety and security have some specific training and that that's recognized and acknowledged. So that's the reason to put together or to start offering this church safety and security certification for people that go through our training.
And so that, which adds a lot of value to it.
Right,
Absolutely. If there's a somewhat of a standardization that's put out there, then I think one of the good points in what you just said is that, church leadership for many churches, it's tough for leadership to get on board. That this is a ministry for one thing, but also how is it done well? How do we know that it's being done well? And then it also gives the individual that's leading that security team or training up people a guideline, because a lot of them are even struggling with what does training look like? What should we be training on? And that it's not all focused on the firearm piece.
Right.
If anybody has listened to us for any period of time or been to our seminars, we know that it's not all focused on the firearm piece, that it's very much a church security through prevention.
Right.
I mean, that's why we call the podcast that, is because we're working on what can we do to create as much prevention as possible instead of being reactionary later on
Right.
in that.
And our training, just like you're saying, we've been doing seminars and trainings around the country for several years now. And our training always focuses on, just like you said, on prevention. It's not just, here's what to do with your gun when a shooter arrives in your sanctuary or on your property. It encompasses property, logistics and management, as well as identifying somebody who's acting suspiciously, as well as even church staff being aware of somebody who is, the term we use is leaking, that they're showing evidence of some intent to harm either themselves or somebody else. So the training in prevention, like you said, is very critical. And that is part of being certified, is you know what to look for. You don't just know how to shoot a gun or what to do when somebody arrives with a gun, but you have a bigger perspective.
Yeah, and I think it goes beyond. Yes, absolutely. Bigger perspective. You know what to look for, but you also know how to handle a variety of situations.
Right.
This is why we teach. Verbal de-escalation as being that foundational piece in the security. In church security.
Right.
And I could easily see this in many ways spilling over in some aspect into other ministries, because something that I say oftentimes at the seminars is that church security is a total team concept.
Right.
You got to have your ushers on board, your greeters, your children's workers, your staff on that, to where we're going to certify the security, the individuals that have been called to stand on the wall.
Right.
On that. But we also have processes in place that either that we're looking at. That can be a different certification piece for those individuals that are not the security team, but I would imagine they're just as vital to the security of the church that need that verbal de-escalation, that need that situational awareness training and things as well.
Right. Yeah, and I think one way to think about it is, at this point anyway, we're not planning on certifying secretaries and administrators and Sunday school teachers and that sort of thing, but they do need to have training, and they need to have an awareness of basic things to look for. And so, as an example, school teachers and college professors get trained on what it looks like when somebody is struggling, what it looks like when somebody's a risk. Those teachers or administrators in a school don't get certified or don't get special designation as being on the security team, so to speak.
Right.
But they have an awareness, and they know who to go to when there's a problem. And so churches, the certified safety and security officers, can train their own churches about what to look for and how to be protective of the people in their area of influence, whether it's people just coming through the door on a weekday or somebody in a Sunday school class or whatever. But the church will know these are the certified safety and security staff or officers. And so we know to go to them when there's a problem, but we also know how to detect a problem. And we certainly will train ushers and Sunday school teachers and youth pastors and whomever on what to look for, general safety awareness like happens in schools, but the certification will be reserved for people on the safety and security team that go through our more intense, more specific training.
And so for churches that are listening today, what would be the kind of the next steps that we can communicate to them, for this process?
Yes, and really the next steps are host a safety and security seminar that CV Ministries puts on. And we have a lot of hands-on training in those seminars. And so people that complete that seminar will be certified. And there is a level 1 and a level 2 certification. So that initial training, which is usually a day and a half, right?
It is, yeah.
So a day and a half of training, combination of classroom type instruction with hands-on, actually practice the skills. and demonstrate a certain level of competence in those skills will be certified as a result of completing that training. And then there'll be ongoing updates for people to maintain their certification. And then we will have more advanced levels of certification as well, with more intensive hands-on training. And probably for what I think will become for church safety and security team leaders, that the level 2 certification will become that. And I think it's important to put this in the context of church ministry in general. So several hundred years ago, there was not much in the way of ordination of pastors. Maybe you went to Bible college, maybe you went to seminary, very many times not, especially in more rural areas. Maybe it was that you were called within that context of that church and just began teaching and preaching. But over time, there was more an awareness of people who are proclaiming God's word and God's truth, leading the people in the church or in the pews, needed more knowledge, needed more training, needed to know how to minister effectively to people. And so ordination came into being, or at least became more commonplace. And this is really not that different. And to be clear, I'm not saying that certification is the same thing as ordination. It's not. But it is recognition and a formal pronouncement of you've been through training and you have a certain level of knowledge and ability. So it will mirror or parallel the ordination process. But it's just recognizing, like you said, that church safety and security is a valid ministry, and it needs to be done by people who have been trained and have a certain level of skill.
And I think that, we can go in and, as we do, and do a seminar, and with what we believe is the foundational pieces, the basics of what people need to know to be able to perform security as a ministry and to do it well.
Right.
But it can't stop there.
Right.
I mean, they have to have continual training. I mean, there
Right.
has to be. I know some churches do it quarterly. I've had discussions with to where it's like, is that enough?
Right.
To be able to stay proficient. Personally, I like the monthly model.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to take some months off. There's hunting season. There's Christmas. There's Thanksgiving. There's different months that are just not going to work well for training. But for the most part, it's a monthly training to where you're going over, you're refreshing on these skills that you can't just assume that it's a one and done and then you're certified in it. In many ways, I would think there would have to be something that that tracks, or communicates that there's a continual training.
Right, and we have that mechanism in place, but it's very important to clarify a couple of things. One is, and you're exactly right, we would strongly recommend that every church conduct, if not monthly, at least quarterly trainings for their safety and security staff. And you've been on the security team of a large church here in Colorado Springs for, 10 years?
13, coming up on 13.
Okay. And has it been monthly training pretty consistently?
Monthly training, or twice a month if you're part of the armed component.
And that has been, my understanding is, so valuable to you to not only maintain your skills, but update your skills.
Right.
So that is one thing. And again, we would encourage every church to do regular training with their safety and security team. For the certification, it will function, or does function, just like any other certification, that you need to have what are called continuing education units, so that to continue to be certified, you have to go through at least an annual training that is approved by us. It'll either be provided by us or we can approve that training. It really isn't manageable to say that to maintain a certification, and there's not any field in the world that has, if you're certified, that you must do monthly training. Usually there's a certain number of hours that you have to get, 6 hours a year, or 8 hours a year, or 12 hours a year of updated continuing training. And you do that to maintain your certification. And that's how this works as well. you will need to do annually, probably in the neighborhood of 8 hours of continuing education.
Yeah, I see that, and this is what we encourage churches to do anyway, is you have to establish that standard early on. How many hours of training are you going to expect of your team members every year to stay qualified on the church, in security.
Right.
And it's something that there's so many hours, that churches need to establish that there's so many hours of training that need to happen every year in order to stay part of the training team,
right,
or part of the security team. And if you fail to do that, then sometimes there's circumstances, there's grace. But then is there a makeup period, or is there something that can be done to help make up those hours? And we just want to take a quick break here to let you know how to contact us and where to find out more about our national seminar. I see communities that may know why church security is important, but they may not be doing anything about it or don't know how to do it well. Our national seminars are for ushers, greeters, children's workers, staff, volunteers, your security teams, and other ministries in your community. We say that this is a level 1 training that is designed to help equip you to serve well in your various ministries while maintaining a safe place for people to come. Getting churches on the same or similar page when it comes to security will only make the community safer as well. The easiest way to find out more information or to contact us is to go to cv-ministries.com. There you'll find a variety of training DVDs and books, with more being developed all the time. There's also a place at the bottom of the page where you can sign up for our monthly newsletter and to be able to get more information. We would love your feedback on topics or guests that you would like to hear on future podcasts. Okay, now that we have that out of the way, let's get back to the podcast.
To maintain certification, you must do the required number of hours, and I misspoke, it is 8 hours of training annually. That may change over time, but right now it's 8 hours to maintain your certification. And so if you don't get 8 hours of training in an annual time frame, then you won't maintain your certification. And there really can't be grace period for churches and others to have confidence in somebody's certification. Because if it's, they didn't really have any ongoing training last year, but they probably will next year. And so, but they're still certified. That doesn't maintain the quality. It doesn't maintain the expectation or support the expectation that this is somebody that not only got some information once upon a time, but is continuing to have refresher information and new information and keeping their skills fresh. And there's a process that not only monitors that, but maintains it.
Yeah, I think what comes to mind for me is, we've added a medical piece to our seminars, and to where individuals, doctors, nurses come in and they teach a Stop the Bleed course, and they give a certification that they are certified for this period, or even Red Cross for CPR, AED training.
Right, exactly.
It's only good for a certain, and then you have to renew it.
And if you don't,
you lose it.
Right. And that even applies to the Red Cross's basic first aid.
Right.
You have to do an initial training, and then you have to do annual updates, or you don't keep your first aid certification. And this is the same thing, and this is equally important, that to say that we are certifying this person as a church safety and security professional, there are standards to meet. And that does help advance the field. It does give the local church confidence that people who are serving in their church know what to do, know how to protect the people who are attending or who are involved. Yeah. Well, so a couple other comments. One is that up till now, churches, and maybe this was more true, we'll say 5 or 10 years ago, but a church would hear something about church safety and security, or somebody on staff maybe has a law enforcement or a military background and understands the need for protection. And so would put together a team or go to a sheepdog seminar and get a lot of good information, but maybe not as much hands-on actual skill building. But then take that and put together their team and do it kind of, and I don't mean this negatively, but kind of willy-nilly, meaning there wasn't a lot of formal, systematic training and understanding of what really was required. And I think you and many people listening to this broadcast also have recognized that just because somebody or a specific church has 5 people with concealed carry permits and they bring their guns to church, if there's an incident, if there's not coordinated training, there can be a lot of shooting and a lot of unintended consequences and injuries because there isn't a team, systemic, coordinated approach. And so certification provides the training to have a well-developed, thought-through approach for that church's safety and security team. So when you have a team of everybody who's certified, then you know everybody on this team meets a certain standard and has the same understanding and has the same information and knows what to do. So you can have confidence in your team members if you're on the safety and security team. And the pastor and church leadership can also have confidence that we have a coordinated, well-developed team and approach to church safety and security.
Yeah, and I think that that confidence piece is huge because, and I'll often say this, that I don't, if there is somebody that is not coming to training, I'm not confident going into a situation with them.
Right.
It's the individual that I've trained with for years that if we go into a situation, because we've trained together for so many years, he knows what my skill level is. I know what his skill level or maybe even his strengths are, and to where we are going to be able to respond and react appropriately together for the safety of each other and the safety of whatever else is going on.
Right.
It's no different than a law enforcement guy. He wants to know that the individual, his partner that's coming onto the scene with him is going to be able to, that they're on the same page with what needs to happen. And so that's all we're doing here is writing a standard, or putting out a standard that says for church security, this is the standard that we feel is important to have, and that churches need to be training on.
Right. And not just putting out a standard, we are actually doing the certifying. So we know that the instruction and training that the person is getting is what they need to have to function effectively.
Right.
Because if we just put out a standard, anybody can put out a standard, but if there's no way to train people to that standard, then you have no idea. Somebody could say, well, sure, I read the standard, but then have no skill in implementing the specifics of that standard. Right. So certification, again, ensures, like you said, which is so important to have a standard, but also ensures that people are trained to that standard and meet that expectation. And you made a great point, but to go back to the Red Cross. So if I have a card, first aid certification from the Red Cross, and I come upon an accident, and somebody else comes upon an accident, and they also have their first aid certification, I can say to that person with confidence, well, you do chest compressions while I do apply a tourniquet. And I know they know what that means. If somebody doesn't have a first aid training or a first aid card, I would have no way of knowing if they would know how to do chest compressions. And so this is the same thing. By having certification, then you know other people on your team have the same knowledge base, are using the same language, and know what to do in certain situations.
So I know the question is going to come up. We've been giving out certificates for years of training that we've been doing our seminars and various other trainings that show the hours of training that were given. The seminar is roughly 11 and a half hours of training, so that more than satisfies that year's 8 hours of training. And in that, we also have a database of everybody who's attended one of our seminars. And within that database, then explain a little bit how that how that certification gets renewed or doesn't get renewed or whatever, how does that work for the individual?
Yes. So we will grandfather somebody that has been through our trainings before, as long as it's been from January of 2019 on. And that may seem like an arbitrary date, but we have updated the training that's happened in our workshops over time. And since that time, it's been pretty standard. And we will grandfather people back to from January 1, 2019 forward. If you've attended one of our seminars, you will be given a level 1 certification. So you need to contact us via email. Contact Dan Blevins, and let him know that you want the level 1 certification, and we will send out a specific certificate that says that. And then moving forward, and it'll be on the year. And so if you go to a safety and security certification training with us, let's say in November of a given year, you're not going to have to renew and get 8 hours of updated training in that last month. It'll be from the year forward. But prior to the last quarter of the year, any training that you do, you'll need to get the updated refresher in the next year. So every year we will track in our database if you have completed your continuing education requirement and thus are maintaining your certification. And so one other thing, so if a church, for example, wants to know, has Bill Smith in our congregation, is he a certified church safety and security officer? We can answer that question. We can say, yes, he completed his certification on such and such a date, and he's had 1 or 2 or whatever the number is, years of meeting his continuing education requirements, so he is currently certified and in good standing.
And some of this information, I would think, would come from the church security leaders for that church,
right?
Because they are going to have that standard of what we say is the standard of to be certified,
right?
And as long as they're training to that standard, then their individuals will maintain their certification,
right? Well, as long as they have an approved 8 hours,
right?
Documented. So if they don't come to one of our continuing education trainings, then they'll need to submit what training they did, and we will have to approve that.
Correct.
And so what will happen over time, and hopefully sooner rather than later, is what happens with nurses or therapists or physicians or firefighters or law enforcement professionals who are post-certified or whatever, that if you move from Dallas, Texas to Birmingham, Alabama, you carry your certification with you. So when you go to your new church and want to join their safety and security team, by saying, yes, I'm certified, that will give the new team confidence that you can be brought in and you already have a certain level of knowledge and ability.
Yeah, and I think that is a plus. I have a friend who has recently left one church and that security team, moved to another church, and expressed interest in joining their security team. They have other protections in place, which is great. They want them to be involved in the church in other aspects first, and those kinds of things. But this would be a value to him. To be able to have that, so that when he meets the church's other requirements to be able to serve, that he can step in, into that level.
Right. And it's a value to him. You're exactly right. It's also a value to the church.
Right.
So once a person meets whatever requirements for service that church has, then once you're brought on to the security team, you hit the ground running.
Yeah.
They know.
I think to a degree. I think to some aspects, the church, I mean, I think of my time in the military. It didn't matter what my training record said I was qualified to do or not do.
Right.
They're still going to test me
Right.
at the next duty station
Right.
on what are my skill sets.
But they expect a certain level of
They
competence.
do expect me to be able to
Right.
to accomplish that. So that church I would expect isn't going to just accept it, carte blanche, to just blanket accept it without some sort of validation that, yep, yeah, okay, we get it, you did it, let's see you do it. Okay, you're good.
Right. And again, if we use the example of CPR or first aid, or let's say a nurse. So, well, let's use the example of a nurse. So let's say you move from hospital A to hospital B. Hospital A and hospital B may have different operating procedures.
Right.
They may have a different method for how they do things. But they know that because this is an RN, a registered nurse, that he or she has a certain skill set and can do certain tasks. And they may want you to do those tasks a little differently, but the expectation is you know how to perform the basics of that task. And so, yes, a given church may implement things or practice things a little differently, but they also will have the expectation that the certified person has the knowledge and the skill set to do the functions. They just need to do it in the way this particular church does it.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely.
And then, of course, like you said, hopefully the church safety and security team leader, if the church has that, monitors to ensure that even though they're certified, they still are functioning in an appropriate way.
Right.
That's important. And like you said, in the military, when you went to a different duty station, they knew you had certain certifications, they knew you had certain training, and so they expected you to know how to do things, but they also would kind of watch for a while just to make sure, one, that you were doing it in the way they wanted you to at the new duty station, and two, that even though you were certified, you also were using those skills in an appropriate way.
Right, absolutely. And so just so that everybody knows, that they're more than welcome to contact us to ask any questions. Moving into the next year, COVID's thrown a kink into a little bit, but we're moving forward. We finished out the year doing a few seminars. We're looking forward to doing them into the next year and getting more and more churches. I often tell people in the seminars that because it's not just a church that we're doing this with, we want them to invite churches throughout the community,
right.
Because the more churches that are on board with the training, with the certification, then it just makes for a safer community in general.
Right.
And then, like we often talk about is that, if one church is doing a concert and the other church in town has, one church is doing a concert, but they need some extra guys. They can contact the other, or a big event, VBS, whatever it looks like, contact the other church that they know that they've done training with. Right. And say, hey, can you guys come on over and give us a hand with this?
And even more importantly, not only that they've done training with, but they're certified.
Right.
So if you had let's say a big outdoor event, then whoever is hosting that event may want to have 10 Red Cross first aid certified people there, just to make sure if some medical emergency happens, it can be addressed. And so they would just say, if you have a first aid card or an up-to-date CPR card, then great, come and we'll use you in this event. And just like you said, that same thing can happen at churches. So we have a concert or we have a conference or whatever. So if somebody else in town has the certification, the safety and security certification, then we can bring them over to help us in this event.
Right. Yeah, because they know everybody's going to be pretty much on the same page.
Exactly.
Yeah,
right.
And what church security looks like and needs to look like.
Right, exactly.
And it's going to vary, just like the personalities of every church varies. There's a variance to it. It's not, but there's still those foundational pieces that we all need to have to be able to perform this ministry well. You can definitely find out more information about the certification process on our website. We do have a page dedicated to information on the certification, and it will give you hopefully answer a lot of your questions. But should it not, you're more than welcome to email us and ask more questions, and we'll get those answers for you. Something else that we need to discuss at some other point, because you'll notice on our website we do have a piece or a page that talks about accreditation.
So the accreditation it's kind of like certifying the church itself. The certification is certifying an individual person that they have the skills. So yes, churches or ministries can be accredited by us that their practices, their policies, their procedures are worthy of being accredited. And again, probably the easiest way to think about it is that's like a certification for the church.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, and I'm sure we'll have questions on that at some point too.
Right. And so anybody that's attended any of our workshops or seminars from January 1, 2019 forward can contact us, and you will be certified as soon as we get that contact from you. And then we'll send a certificate to you. So this is available to you now, again, if you've attended a seminar from January 1, 2019 forward. And then the clock will start running on your continuing education. You'll have to do your 8 hours of continuing education sometime in 2021 to maintain the certification. If you get certified in 2021, then you will need to get your hours complete. Well, if you get certified in the first 3 quarters of 2021, then you'll need to, by the end of 2022, finish your continuing education to maintain your certification. So you're always a year ahead in terms of getting your continuing education hours done.
Right, 12 months of certification.
Right. Yep.
Right.
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you very much for being here.
Yes, you're welcome.
Unpacking that a little bit more for everybody.
Yep. You're welcome.
All right. We look forward to seeing how churches respond and people respond, and we'll definitely forward questions or field questions. Both of us will field questions as they come in.
Yep. Very good.
Thank you so much for taking time to listen to this podcast. If you really enjoyed it and you found it of benefit to you, we really appreciate your feedback. There's several different ways that you can provide us feedback. One of them is to subscribe to the podcast, is to share it with others, and another is to contact us directly, particularly if you have any questions or concerns, or you want more information on how to host a seminar in your community. You can contact me directly at danielblevins@cv@heart.com, or you can go to our website. That's cv-ministries.com. Both of those will get you in the right direction. Until next time, make sure that you're out there protecting the flock with a heart of service.